I'm really looking forward to this workshop to kind of see what some folks are doing. All of the presenters today were a part of the FACS 2024 cohort that worked over the summer to really learn about generative AI and ways to incorporate generative AI into the classroom. And so what we're going to see today is examples from each of them of specific ways they have integrated AI into their classes to help their students learn how to use generative AI as part of their classroom. So I'm really looking forward to that. So we've got here in person, we've got Christopher Bolden from biology. I'll let each of them kind of introduce themselves also, and Laura Oliver from art. And then joining us online, we've got Daniella Mascarenhas from political science, and we will have Quincy Hodges from mass communication also joining us. So, like I said, in sake of time, I'm just going to hand things over, and maybe we'll just kind of work down the list here. So we want to start with Christopher Bolden from biology. Sure. I'll get you queued up here.
All right, welcome everyone. My name is Christopher Bolden. I am a second-year professor in the Department of Biology. And so I want to tell you about the project that I worked on this summer and what we're doing with our students. So I'm a part of a cohort of 2 with me and Dr. Joanna Hay in the Department of Biology. We teach a CURE course, which is a course that gives students a chance to do hypothesis-driven research. And so in the project, we talk a little bit, the main project is looking at Lynch syndrome. And Lynch syndrome is just a combination where someone has an error in their genes that they can't correct. That's the simplest way for the non-biology majors in the room. And so they develop these cancers throughout multiple parts of their body. Well, we take it back and look at the gene level. And so what my project did was incorporate AI as well as bioinformatics at the same time. So what we first did was we used this thing called CODP, and we took the human protein of the student, gave the students the FASTA sequence and gave them the human protein. And then what it does is it does a prediction in 2 steps. And we use this as a way for the first part to let students test this experiment out throughout the entirety of the course to see how well the predictive modeling actually models what we're going to do in the research. And so it gives them some unique information, and this is type of the results that they'll get. It'll tell us that when they changed one process, which means they just changed one letter of their genetic code, they changed it from 1, it'll tell you if it's going to impair, oops, I'm going to fix it. It's rushing around. You can go ahead and keep talking. Okay, it's going to tell them if it's going to cause a major impact in the protein, which leads to the people that have these diseases, or not. And so students work on that throughout the semester, and that's part of the things that we use some of the predictive modeling that I learned how to do throughout the summers for that experiment. We then use something that's really new, and it's called Provian. And Provian is really cool because you can do this from any organism. So those who are biologists or public health or chemistry want to look at some type of compounds, you can take this in, put it in, and it'll tell you if what you want to change in this organism is going to cause a major effect or a minor effect. And so we do that as well. But the real thing that gets into the AI was this assignment. So this is the first assignment that they are assigned on the first day of course. So after I've given the project, we started the project, we want them to go ahead and start writing an introduction for a lab report. And not a simple lab report just for the turn in for class, but our goals is, as this is an NIH funded project, we hope that they can get publications in the journal. And last semester, we were able to get a couple of students who were actually able to publish their research in ZulaNexus, and we have one that's also being published in one of our molecular biology research articles. So what we wanted to do was, we wanted them to first create this themselves. So we want them to take this information, write this themselves. Then we want them, what we really learned from this summer is to use Perplexity. And Perplexity is probably one of the coolest AI systems that I learned to work with this summer. Besides Gamma. Gamma is my personal favorite from the summer. But we use Perplexity. We want them to see how well they can create a response to generate this introduction as well. When they create it, I want them to compare it against the version that they created themselves and look at the version that they create, that the AI system. Then they write a reflection on it to see how in tune it actually matches the rubric. So I just gave them this instructions, but there's a rubric that's also we use for scoring of the assignment. And we want to see how much, depending on their prompt, how well they're able to match and get the full points from the rubric if they wrote it themselves, versus what an AI system can generate. And what we thought of, and this is something that wasn't originally put into my project from the summer, was this. So this is the new assignment that we're working on now. So as you can see, this is one of the papers that were published in Zula Nexus from last semester, which you see me and Dr. Hayes listed as instructors because these are some of our students. We want them to see when they put in their paper into this system, into ChatGPT, how well can it produce an abstract that will be used for like publication for this system. And so what we did was we took some of the final projects from last semester and started generating it. We even took in the original project that this paper was written on and seeing how well would the ChatGPT match the abstract for this. And so we realized as we get more and more specific in our prompt, it was able to generate a better prompt. So the first time was like, write an abstract from this file, very simple. Then it went from write this as an undergraduate biology student writing this process. We even went as far as write this as a public, we even changed it from different aspects. Write this as a public health professor, seeing different aspects of how this is going to generate their content. And so what we're doing now is trying to see which other ways we can incorporate it into this CURE course, because while we have the funding to provide this opportunity, we realize that the AI utilities of generating different components has been very beneficial. And what we're trying to look at now is using Canva to go into the aspect of seeing how well we can generate a figure that represents some of these figures that I originally presented at the beginning at these different areas of which this Lynch syndrome affects those tissues. And so that's the project that we're working on right now in the genetics course.
Any specific questions for Christopher? We'll have time for questions at the end as well, but anybody wants to toss a question out? Now, anything on the chat?
All right.
Thank you. That's great. I'm going to switch gears here, and I think have Daniella present.
That's cool. I can share my screen as well. Do I have the ability to do? All right. So I'm going to keep time so I don't go over time. I'm Daniella Mascarenhas. I'm a professor in political science. I'm really excited to share the assignment that I worked on. I'm specifically a political theorist, so I am looking at how artificial intelligence affects our politics kind of in normative evaluations. I'm specifically applying this to values of democracy and the threat of despotism. So the title of my assignment is New Despotism 2.0. There's some important background, I think, that you need before I talk about this assignment. I co-authored a book chapter with a mentor of mine from University of Houston, Jeffrey Church. And in our chapter, we explore how AI algorithms can pose a threat to democratic engagement as a new form of despotism. We work with Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote this book called Democracy in America in 1835. And so Tocqueville comes over from France and he studies this new United States, this new democratic nation. And he argues that modern democracies like the United States don't have to fear old style despotism. And this old style despotism is where this single ruler has this iron fist over citizens and rules them and suppresses their freedom. And it's very obvious who is doing the oppression. In modern democracies, it's actually new forms of despotism that come from those democratically elected leaders. These democratically elected leaders will feed information to the public that essentially pacifies them. And citizens go, oh, well, my leader said it and I believe it. And it's much easier for me to believe what these leaders said rather than seeking out my own information. So these new modern democracies actually have a threat of new despotism that comes from a civically disengaged public that just accepts whatever information is fed to them. So my co-author and I argue that AI can become this new despotism, that it can feed citizens information about political activity and political events that leads to their civic disengagement. And that's what we call New Despotism 2.0, hence the title. So I developed this assignment to help students recognize and resist New Despotism 2.0. So first I have students read the article that I wrote, the book chapter that I wrote, and then I have students complete 4 key tasks that cultivate critical thought and information literacy. So task 1 that you see here, I have students choose 2 different AI bots from the 3 that are here. I learned about these in my fellowship, Perplexity, Gemini, or Copilot. And so they then have to ask these chatbots a politically charged question about like a politically salient issue. You can see a list of some of those questions that they ask their chatbots. What caused January 6th? What was the purpose of the US Civil War? And then I purposefully ask them to program a chatbot to answer as if a conspiracy theorist might answer something. So I'm purposefully asking them to try and get misinformation from a chatbot. So in the second phase, the students will take these responses that they get, and they have to submit these responses. I want to see what the chatbot says to them. And in the second phase here in task 2, they essentially have to write a comparison and contrast of what they got from these chatbots. They critically analyze the content. They compare how those chatbot responses were similar, how they were different. They note the substance and how the information is delivered. Is it delivered in a very divisive way? Do the conspiracy theorist chatbots use some real information that then push conspiracy? Right? I want them to notice how the content is shared amongst these chatbot answers. So this kind of gets students to think about how AI might present information that shapes their interpretation of events. And so they're questioning not only what the AI says, but also how it says it. In the third task, they evaluate the sources that they get from the AI chatbots. So very specifically, I chose the 3, the Perplexity, Gemini, and Copilot, because those are chatbots that list their sources. So when you get an answer from them, it'll tell you, oh, I got it from SparkNotes, or oh, I got it from this academic journal. And so it gives this list of references, and students will access those references and then evaluate how reliable the source is. They'll examine authors, what the credentials of those authors are, the reliability of the medium, right? Is it a news article? Is it an academic article? And then students will learn how they, if information is trustworthy or not, essentially kind of combating the despotism, the information that could be fed to them. Then in the last task, they reflect on how the information that was given to them impacts democracy largely. They would have been working with definitions of democracy, what democracy means in the United States. And so they do an assessment of how the chatbot answers either enhance or curb access to democracy. This assignment, I think, is very helpful because, and I'm going to stop sharing and come back to you. This assignment, I think, is very helpful because it helps students critically evaluate political information. And in questioning these AI responses, they can analyze sources, reflect on threats to democracy, and they can think critically in an age where a lot of information is given to them and a lot of that information is not always accurate. Students haven't done this assignment yet, but I've tried to prime them in various ways in preparation for this assignment. So, for instance, early in the semester, I asked students to do some research on what they think political theory is as a study. And then they bring in their ideas and we compare it to responses from chatbots. What did they miss? What did the chatbot say? Is the chatbot source acceptable as a source for defining what political theory is? I also use the chatbots a lot. I pull them up in my class. So, and this is really helpful for biographical information. We do a lot of reading these historical people and they're responding to their political moment. And a lot of times students don't know what that political moment is. So when we're reading Niccolo Machiavelli, for instance, these students aren't necessarily familiar with all of the intricacies of how the Italian city-states were warring with each other. I use AI to kind of give them that information. Or, what was the fall of the Roman Republic when we're reading Cicero? So I'm trying to get them used to getting these chatbots and using information, and so that when they come to this assignment, they'll be fairly confident in navigating these chatbots. And I'm thinking about how essentially we can use these machines, the AI, and use them for our benefit. So, all right, I'm close to time, so I'll go ahead and stop there. And I hope that this has been helpful.
That's great, thank you. And moving right along, we're going to have Laura Oliver now from the Department of Art. Let me make sure I get the right presentation here. And let me make sure I share the screen properly.
All right, hello, everybody. I am Laura with the Department of Art and Performance Studies. Specifically, I'm professor of performance. So primarily, we're going to discuss arts, right, as a premise of creative expression, but focus more specifically on embodied storytelling. So this is no, yeah, I was looking at my notes. So here is just a brief overview of what we're going to discuss today. The course itself, I'll go over the assignment description, provide some examples of the student stories, or at least just talk about them briefly, but more so focus on the reflection aspect, and then some further thoughts of how I'm continuing this research. So the course itself is currently being taught in performance studies, a special topics course, Black horror and performance. And we're looking at the intersection of Blackness, how it is performed in everyday life, and this crossover between how we experience everyday life horror, how sometimes real life events, right, can cause us racial trauma and social anxiety for Black individuals. So I created a concept of combining the word storytelling with horror and created Horries to describe this element of deep-seated truths about race, culture, and power. In the class itself, they do critical reflection. So they're responding to different films like Tales from the Hood, and they clone Tyrone, as well as discussion posts, and then finally the creation of original horror stories with AI. So that's what we're talking about today. For each unit in the class, we have 5 units that we're focusing on episodes from the Atlanta series on Hulu. And then they're creating horror stories in response to the themes of those units. And unit 1 was just an introduction. What is everyday life performance? What is everyday life horror? And so those themes reflected around Blackness. And this is the assignment description, very simple. I want to emphasize that when I originally wrote the assignment, it was really long-winded, right? And then AI helped me simplify it for this current generation, right? And so they understood what were the directions, and then what were they supposed to submit. So here I'm just emphasizing that the assignment itself is a short story, 750 words to 1,000 words, and then the reflection, which is 150 to 200 words. Very simple. And so we'll talk about some of the work that they did. The class is small, thankfully, yeah. So 7 students, but it's a mix of freshmen all the way to seniors. So the type of level, the work itself was very a mix, right? They selected their themes. And here's the emphasis or the results of those themes. We have a lot of stories about Black women and healthcare. Not surprising, 6 out of 7 students are Black women, right? And so it's good that they want to see themselves reflected in the work that they're doing. The healthcare system adds this nuanced importance of what is primarily important to them. And these things could be horrific depending on the experience for Black women, right? Culture and food was also a conversation, and then finally hidden family histories. So everyone completed the assignment, and only 1 student did provide a reflection. Nothing too serious, they just forgot to do the extra part of the assignment. So one of the stories I'm highlighting is called The Blood Right. This particular story is about a student wanting to talk about getting your menstrual cycle as a young girl, and how that can be a horrific experience depending on how it happens. And so in the story itself, she writes about a girl who basically gets her period in school, and she's unprepared for it, and people are talking about her. And so she inserts these ideas into AI and emphasizes in her reflection, right? It helped me explain those ideas a bit better. It helped me underline how are these experiences sort of like traumatic for an individual that goes through, and it's not just specific to race, right? But that it could be applicable to other young girls. But the emphasis of how it may be experienced in a Black household. Immediately, one is understood to be an adult in a way that is different from you're growing into a young woman. And so this sexualization of Black women is often a common conversation in scholarship, and I think it is being reflected in this student story. Another example here, Black soul food. So the student wrote a story and she identified with the prompt she uses, right? I want to write a story about soul food that's tampered with by a white guest at an office party. And then reflecting in the second paragraph, right, that AI opened my ideas to explore that it's just not the food causing the illness, but it's also connected to this ancestral trauma that could be a response to how Black individuals were stripped away from their cultures and traditions, the enslaved persons, but then having this moment of circling back. So this is connected to one of the episodes we watched in Atlanta that's talking about reparations, if you're familiar with the series. And in the series, they play on a nuanced role of Black individuals are getting money from different white people across America. All of a sudden, you have to pay up, and it might affect your finances. And so they're responding to this play on the horrific in that episode, right, of how it could juxtapose with food. So further thoughts on this, I'm thinking about publishing a short story book with my students, right? These are generative stories. Reflected of Jordan Peele currently has a short story book called Out There Screaming right now, which is about everyday life horror stories by different people. And he's edited the book, right? Their critical thinking skills have increased as a result of these assignments. And I use AI in all of my classes, by the way. And so we talk about what does that look like, what resources are we using, and they always have to reflect on how are they using this. I also have a description in my syllabus on how what are the consequences of using it incorrectly. This month, I'm doing other workshops with other universities about this same thing. And so I would love to see what is the result of that research in future publication. And then finally, this element of what is the consequence of performance studies, generating things with AI. Well, in my argument, in order to be a creator, right, you have to be interested in continuing to get fresh ideas. So that is a part of AI. However, live storytelling is still important. And so the performance of that story increases this human interaction with the audience. How are we sustaining what it means to engage in storytelling that could be traumatic from an individual? That could be different from reading in a book and then performing it and really feeling somebody's pain. All right, so that's kind of all I got. The last thing I want to say is that I have also integrated this in my work. And so I have a show coming up this month, Beauty Shop of Horrors, where we play with the idea of integrating AI in some of the ways we conceive some of the scenes. So not the whole thing, but just a little bit. And that's it for me.
And as I'm getting our final speaker, Quincy Hodges from Mascarenhas, set up here, I just thank all of our speakers for being mindful of their time. Sure.
Yeah. Online folks, Chris, you just mentioned in passing that you use Canva. Somebody asked, how did you use it? Was that for the images creation?
Yeah, for to make the images for put into like their journal. So like have an introduction of like whatever the disease process is. So we're trying to get them to use Canva to create like just an organ, and then we can add in the science parts to make it so like this is AI generated image, and then when they can fully illustrate their disease process and everything.
Cool.
Excellent, thank you. And Quincy, you should be able to share your screen if you want to. Oh, you're muted right now.
Sorry, I'll be quick in the interest of time. Thank you all for having me. Let me see here if I can do this. Oh, it looks different on my screen. Okay, so yeah, so I teach, this is my first year teaching this semester, teaching this course, AI in human communication, right? So this course is pretty much set up where students are each week, they are tasked with doing a different communication style or technique using AI and using traditional human communication, right? So we are midway through the semester, so we're like on drill 7 and 8 now. But this I'll take you all back to the beginning of the semester, drill 1, and getting students comfortable with using AI, right? So this this particular assignment here is a typical profile interview you would do for a journalism student or mass comm student, right? So students were tasked with finding staff or faculty, maybe a favorite professor they had, and just doing a regular Q&A interview with them, right? So they had to, prepare questions and get the background of the professor, learn about their journey and things like of that nature, right? And then they would write the story as if, normally as a journalism student would do. And then secondly, I tasked them with using AI to do that same task, right? So instead of finding your professor, you would just use AI. You would use any LLM model um, or system and do the interview, right? So you would just do an AI interview of your favorite professor or staff member, and look at that. That would be your output. And then lastly, this last component is a reflection of their experience, versus, human communication, traditional methods versus AI methods, right? So each drill, each assignment we build each week, it has an AI component, a human component, and then a reflection component, right? So each week they are tasked with pretty much being critical of AI, either in a good way or a bad way. So this particular assignment, many of the students really liked this assignment. They were able to, talk to their professors, and some of them were, I believe, coaches as well. Some of the coaches here on campus, and just really to have a intimate Q&A interview with them, which they often sometimes don't get a chance to do. So I will show a few students work. um do you all see this? Yes, okay. So I have one student, they interviewed Dr. Edwards in the computer science department, right? And they had a great conversation with Dr. Edwards, and they found this particular student, when you introduce an AI to it, I'm not going to read it all, but you can read it. But when they did the AI section, they changed the name. Funny enough, right? They didn't want to put Dr. Edwards' name in AI, but what they did was, hey, do a profile story on a computer science professor at Xavier University of Louisiana. And funny enough, the student indicated that many of the responses were similar to what Dr. Edwards had told my student, which was kind of scary. Even my student mentioned it. Some of the things that came back with AI, he said, some of the things were scary, that they were so identical to what Dr. Edwards had verbally told my student, right? Um, I read this section here. The scary part comes as I wonder how it knew that Dr. Edwards is who I wanted to emulate. Considering how I could only speculate about it, I must move on for the rest of the interview. So he's kind of funny in his response. But anyway, he in his AI section, he named the fictional professor Dr. ChatGPT, right, which was pretty funny. Um, um, but again, it was very interesting how there were some overlaps and similarities there. But he also indicated that obviously talking to Dr. Edwards in the flesh was obviously a more uh, more of a revealing experience about, what her journey and her background and the specifics of her journey as a professor. And then I'll just show one last one, and we can I get out the way. Oh, this is a rubric I had for the class. Oh, for this assignment, excuse me. I'm sorry, I have all of this pulled up. Sorry. I'm trying to find it. Okay, here it is. I have another student here, one student named Nico, and he decided to do a coach. He works for the basketball team here, um, and he did one of the coaches, and normal Q&A interview he did in person. And what was interesting with Nico here with his assignment, he did the same thing, same questions, and he put it in ChatGPT and Perplexity. So he compared two different models, AI models, and he found that the AI was Perplexity was a little bit better than ChatGPT, giving him accurate information and basic information about the coach, and also what my student indicated was that AI, Perplexity, for example, gave him more information about the coach um, that the coach did not tell him personally in the interview, right? He indicated um, that either the coach he either forgot to say it or it just slipped his mind. My student indicated that he did remember the coach saying he had experiences at, for example, BRCC years ago, and he mentioned that to him a long time ago at a different juncture, but he didn't indicate it in the interview, right? So my student here was just saying that how AI could be a benefit when it comes to, you know, getting information and getting everything that is available about a particular person that is available on the internet, right? So which was really interesting. So each course, each week, we build on this concept, right? So the following, next week or the second week, we did PR, right? Then we did crisis management or crisis communication, and then we did social media content, and on and on and on. I don't have to belabor the point, but each each assignment pretty much is set up where uh, you have traditional human communication, you have AI, section AI, using AI for communication, and then you reflect on that experience. And then we have two mini projects set up where we do a midterm project, and then we will complete a final project. And then lastly, myself and Dr. Roberts, we are actually using this course and the other AI course to do academic research. So we just submitted an extended abstract to a journal about the experiences of HBCU students, in particular, using AI and how it could either amplify their voices or how their voices are not reflected in some of these AI models. And I'll stop there.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all. And we do have about 10 minutes or so for questions, either online, the chat Mark can relay to us, or if folks want to hop on the speaker, or anybody in the audience wants to ask a question or share their own experience.
One question was to ask Quincy was, did your students find the AI hallucinating when it was presenting information about instructors?
Can you repeat the question?
Sure. Did your students find AI hallucinate at all when doing the presentation, presenting information about your instructors?
Oh yeah, yeah. Okay, great, yeah. So yeah, I didn't, I have, this class is about 15 14 or 15 students. And some students, yeah, they didn't have that same experience, what I just shared with you. Yeah, some students found that it did hallucinate, that it just made up stuff, right? Just totally inaccurate, fake. And then some students indicated that they couldn't get anything about the particular professor or faculty or staff member that they interviewed. So yeah, it was limited for some students. So I kind of highlighted two of my stronger responses with the AI from my students. And and what I'm noticing is that some students are more tech savvy. You're right, a little bit more tech savvy and a little bit more gung ho with using AI and kind of know how to work around it versus just basic, like, pull up ChatGPT and put something in. They know how to work around it. So I do see a level of competency or expertise when it comes to using these AI models and tools. But yeah, great question.
I've got a request for Alam, if you could unmute and ask your question. It's a little fuzzy for me, so I'm not sure what you're trying to ask there.
Hi, thank you guys for the presentations. I was just curious, whenever you guys are incorporating AI in your assignments, are you like having higher expectations when it comes to like if they're using these generated tools, like how much more work is it on your end to ensure that they're also putting in the work as well, like in terms of like paraphrasing and not just copying word for word? And since they are using AI and they're getting like references from these resources that the AI generates, are you expecting more references for your assignments? Like, some professors might say, oh, I want at least 5 references in this assignment, X, Y, and Z.
So I can respond. Because I'm using it in all my classes. And so there are different types of assignments that we're doing. Anything from a discussion post sometimes they're allowed to use AI. So what happens is we talk about the ways in how to properly use it at the beginning of the semester. We go through just some examples of how you can change the language from professional to casual to however you needed to say it. And then we dive deeper into what are the consequences, because most students have used it. So write that survey and then they're apprehensive. They actually don't want to use it in class, or at least admit it out loud. And so it's not that I require them to do any super extra work besides show your work. Similar to like a math or science class, we talk about, hey, just print off the conversation that you had with ChatGPT or Perplexity, whatever it is. How did you engage in that? And also demonstrate how are you going back and editing what it is saying. So sometimes they might show me 2 different prompts or 2 different examples or submissions. But yeah, hopefully that's my take on it.
Thank you.
It's actually just an my experience I have to share. So I'm basically creating my discussion forum, and I see my students' response is so high, like so rich in the wordings. And I know that it's not like undergrad levels, and I know it's something much more than their levels. But I have no clue, acts or anything. So in that case, is there any restrictions or any policy we can use in our syllabus, or how can I judge them?
So one of the things that we learned when we talked about this summer was also making sure that we have an AI policy. It has to be very clear. So it's if you want to say which AIs you can use. So in mine that we incorporated for genetics lab, we have an AI policy. It talks about where the ones that can be used. It also talks about that you have to cite the AI. It talks about it can be used for the generation of your one's work for manufacturing results. Oh, I missed this research that you go in and try to make something to replicate what it does in the lab. You can't use it for that type of generation. So we have a very I'm not gonna say strict, but it's a very detailed policy. In the end, it talks about it has to be cited. These are the appropriate ones to be used for these assignments. And then if you do use it without citing, you do realize that at this point you're not citing your works. It's the same thing. It's not basically performing academic integrity, so you lose any points that are associated with the project.
But is really hard to like, they can change the wordings and structures. So just assignments or like the discussion boards, it's really hard to determine like they use AI or.
I think one of the interesting
But
things.
I'm assuming this is not their work. I cannot tell.
One of the interesting things to approach it from the beginning is that they're going to be using it. And then at the same time, how much work do you want to do as an instructor to teach them how to write at this point? The education system has failed many of our students. And so the writing is really poor. And so I present it as a way of like a resource, a tool. Hey, use this to help you better your writing style. And so throughout the semester, even now, I've already seen the improvement of their writing. So maybe the first assignment was straight up AI, right? You can tell you don't even speak like this in class. So I made those comments in the submission like that. See you using it, here's how to critique and blah, blah, blah. And the next one was different.
We even did genetics lab. We even did like follow-up questions, so we can read some reports. And so when you have a more detailed rubric, sometimes it's a little bit harder for the guy to generate. And so when we're doing the rubrics, like, oh, you talked about this, and it's really good that you can talk about the first person that discovered DNA. That's not what I asked in the rubric. Or sometimes we're just straight up asking, like me and Dr. Hayward asked, like, if we read something really cool in your paper, oh yeah, tell me more about it. And when they're in class, and if they freeze, it's like, oh, you can't tell me about this thing that you wrote 2 pages on? You can't even tell me the first sentence? It's like, okay, so then there's an issue.
So back for our asynchronous classes, I can.
I will just kind of, I mean, there's no good tools right now, and there probably never will be for identifying AI altered or generated content. All of them are in any way reliable.
The only way I can sometimes turn back for the discussion teaching, it has the same structure. If they just copy it from, it's the same. Thank you for blah blah blah.
Yeah.
It's the same format. Okay, you said thank you for every post that has been posted. Something is going on. You're not that grateful in class.
Daniella, were you gonna add something?
I can. I think that my use of AI, first of all, I encourage it, and on my syllabus I have specific ways in which it's appropriate in this class and ways that it's not. I give them examples of really useful ways to use it. But also I think the onus is on us to craft assignments that make it very difficult to use AI and generate answers that just basically do the writing for you. Because as was said before, they're using AI. I mean, I'm using it every day to edit my writing, to find sources. Like, I'm using it. I know the students are using it. We just have to be conscious about the types of assignments we're giving them so that AI doesn't do the work for them because they're using it.
Well, one of the things I do is I put the prompt in AI in my class and show them what the answer, and then I talk about here are the strengths of this one. This is really wrong, and this isn't isn't dealing with my rubric. And so that's my method of kind of getting them a little afraid to use it just totally without any input. And so I think that's helpful.
It really is. The more detailed, I remember before I came here, I was at University of Houston, one of the last workshops, creating assignments that are not AI proof, but it makes it hard to do. So like more detailed rubric and more parts are interchangeable. Because when it's just a broad assignment or a broad topic, it's very easy for AI to choose. But the more detail you put into, and the more focused you are on with your assignment, the harder it is for it. Like I said, we had one that turned into a beautiful report last year. It was probably the best written report we've seen the whole semester. It didn't beat a single thing on the rubric.
CAT actually did a lot during COVID about authentic assessments and developing assessments that were challenged the students to show what they knew, but in a way that couldn't just be kind of mimicked or replicated. And I think a lot of those are still applicable for this new AI era that we're in as well. So if you're interested in those, you can take a look at our CAT wiki. We've got a number of resources about authentic assessments that might be worth considering.
Yeah, I was wondering if kind of like open book style assignments, are they then also kind of something similar to do with AI? Because obviously AI can act as the open book, but you still have to interpret what's being used.
Interpretation or personalization as well. I mean, so I do a lot of stuff where the students are having to put their own experiences or kind of take on things that, again, at least right now, AI doesn't do a good job of doing, right? So right now, anyway. Other questions? We got, I think it's just a couple more minutes here. Is the general consensus that perplexity is the best?
Oh, yeah.
Depends on
What
what
do you use it for, but it's definitely allowed.
Yeah, it's probably the most generative in terms of, it's authoritative as well as the information, it makes sense. And then it automatically also prompts more questions in case you want to go further in the research.
All right, well, thank you all for coming out today. Thank you to our presenters in person and we're gonna have some more coming out, but in 2.5 weeks, October 21st, we have Stephen Aguilar from the University of Southern California coming to talk about how faculty are incorporating AI into the classroom at the University of Southern California. So please keep an eye out for that. That'll be Monday at 3 o'clock. And we have a social hour next Thursday at 4 o'clock. Come meet the new faculty, part-time faculty as well. And you can also help us celebrate Bart's 25th anniversary. Yeah. Thank you all.